My name is Ahmed. I'm from Lebanon. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, never really lived in Lebanon, and then I moved over to the States a few years ago. I did high school in Texas, and then UNM brought me here to New Mexico, and I truly believe it is a land of enchantment because I don't think I ever want to go anywhere else anymore.
Yeah.
I think I'm staying here in New Mexico. I'm majoring in biochemistry. I'm a senior, so I'll be graduating in the upcoming spring semester, and then I'm going into the UNM School of Medicine. I believe the first thing that comes to mind is getting accepted into med school. It's just,
Yeah.
the dream. The end goal is
I
always
know.
med school, and I honestly think of it as just the beginning now. It's not the end goal.
Oh, yeah.
But to get there, what I had to do is practically, I had to really get very well versed in medicine, and unfortunately, and I think this is a reason why something like HPS exists, unfortunately, it's not an area that's very well explored. Most campuses just have one pre-health advisor to serve an entire student body, and that one advisor, no matter how hardworking they are, they can only say so much to every individual student. And then there's also no specific route to medicine. There's not a specific formula of I need to do this and this and this, and then I'm in. And it's more or less, unfortunately, actually unique to the person. It's unique to who you are. And for me, I think what I found really useful was I was a medical scribe for almost 2 years. I allowed me to get a lot of my clinical hours, but it also allowed me to see different areas in medicine. I scribed in a primary care clinic. It was a private practice, so that was a very unique experience, and it was in an underserved area here in Albuquerque. I also scribed in an urgent care. I scribed in an emergency department, in a trauma center. So I saw a lot of different areas, and I was very well into what I was doing, because when you scribe, you actually have to understand and not just simply observe, such as shadowing. I have also shadowed a little bit. I've shadowed oncology, I've shadowed pulmonology. Otherwise, I would say what I've also done to get myself into the medical field is really paying attention in your prerequisite classes pays off, especially when you have to study for the MCAT, because the MCAT has a lot of weight on your application and your candidacy, and it makes it so much easier if when you're studying for that exam you can vaguely remember almost everything on it instead of having to learn things for the first time. I would say that's a few things. I would say the number one reason is for fun. Believe it or not, when I attended the events as an attendee, when I was still not part of the HPS planning committee, it was such a fun event to attend. It was, I really liked the structures of the event. I liked how for every hour of the day I had a lot of things to choose from. I enjoyed how unique the topics were, how I learned a lot from just looking at the program, at the pamphlet itself. I was like, oh my God, those are all different things in medicine. I can't believe it. But on a more serious note, I would say this event is definitely for anybody, not just simply interested in healthcare, but also anyone that thinks healthcare might be something they want to do in the future, or even if you've ever been to your doctor and you just enjoyed the interaction. It just felt different from, say, going into the grocery store and getting some groceries, or going to a restaurant and making an order. If you just simply enjoyed being in a healthcare setting, this is definitely the event for you, as it will broaden your spectrum on what healthcare is, and it will erase a lot of myths about how healthcare is just simply becoming a doctor. There's a lot more that goes into healthcare. My first experience, I attended the event in my freshman year, and that would have been the spring of 2021. And that year, the event was held virtually due to concerns And it was a pretty interesting format, I would say, because we'd all be in a breakout room, and then you'd have to tell the Zoom monitor which room or which workshop, in a sense, do you want to attend, and then they would assign you to that specific room. And I think the very first workshop I attended for HPS was a workshop led by Dr. James McKinnell, and it was about writing a personal statement. That's
very important.
Yes, no, definitely. That was the first interaction I've had with HPS. And then I remember, even though it was over Zoom, I spent the whole day at the event, and it was just jumping from one breakout room to the next. I was taking lots of notes that day, and I wrote down a lot, and I'm not a note taker, so that was very significant for me. And then I think at the very end of the day, it was announced that this event was completely brought into existence by students, and I was really mind blown. I was like, students did this, I was like, there's no way, And I think that's when I filled out the interest form for the HPS planning committee, and that's where I started my journey with HPS. I did not volunteer for HPS before joining the committee. However, I think it's definitely, probably in a sense, the best way to get involved with HPS prior to being in the committee, because I would say on the day of the event, even as a volunteer, you get to get a sense of how much work it took to bring this event into fruition. And the day of the event itself is extremely tedious, but you also get to see all these attendees, just walking out with loads of information. You get to feel that you might have potentially just, changed the trajectory of their life with what was presented. And then if you didn't really mind the work, and instead if you actually were proud of the results, then I think it makes you pretty susceptible to wanting to be on the committee, because it gives you a pretty clear idea of what kind of commitment it will be. However, what is the rewards that you will get out of such a commitment? I did not volunteer for HPS 2021 because I did not actually know that they took volunteers. I guess the outreach for volunteers did not really get to me. Perhaps I missed it somehow. But I would have definitely liked to not just be an attendee, but even straight up just volunteer, and then in the subsequent years perhaps be part of the committee itself. Putting ourselves out there can be both intimidating and confusing. Intimidating because we are all overthinkers, I have not met a single person interested in healthcare that's not an overthinker. I am an overthinker myself. And, I think it takes overthinking to really want to go into this field, and it could definitely be a little bit intimidating to put ourselves out there. And then it's a little bit confusing because it's not like, we just walk around on campus and people approach us and they're like, do you want to do this or that? And we're like, yes, let's go. It takes a little bit more work than that. I would say the way that you could successfully put yourself out there is by filling out any sort of interest forms that come across you. So even though I just said it doesn't always happen, but sometimes when we are walking around on campus, we do get approached by certain organizations, and then they explain really quick what they do. And even if you don't think, it's something you're interested in right away, but if you feel like it's something you might want to consider, then fill out the interest form, because just getting those updates are a means for you to know what they do, and then they're a means for you to just connect with more and more people. That's one thing. Another thing is definitely join pre-med, pre-health, pre-dentistry, pre-anything that you're looking towards in your professional career. There is a club for it here at UNM for undergrads. Join that pre-health club, because they will help you network. They will bring those resources to you. Instead of you putting yourself out, they will put you out, because those clubs get approached by a lot of organizations, including us at HPS, asking for volunteers. So then if you're part of it, you are putting yourself out there. And then finally, I would say don't hesitate to ask, and specifically if you know juniors or seniors, because by the time you are a junior or a senior at UNM, you kind of know everything there is to know, honestly. That's one thing. Or straight up just ask your advisors about any sort of guidance and about how you could get more involved in the local community, whether we're talking about Albuquerque, whether we're talking about UNM, whether we're talking about specifically the medical community here at UNM. And then if you don't have a junior or a senior around, and your advisor might not be always the best help, then perhaps even just your professors in your classes, like your professors for your chemistry, biology classes, they actually know a lot more than you think, because they also get approached by organizations all year round being like, hey, can you please advertise this in your class? Can you just talk about it really quick? We need volunteers. They are phenomenal resources. And I've noticed that a big misconception among undergrads is that we only approach a professor for something specific about their class, but they are extremely knowledgeable about anything that you need, because they've been coaching students like you and students that have made it to the professional schools you want to go to for years, and they have a massive knowledge bank. I believe HPS definitely changed the trajectory of my life. It might be one of the many reasons that I'm really committed to this organization. Maybe I just have a passion and I really believe in the message, but being part of the planning committee for 3 years has definitely enlightened me on a lot of areas, not just medicine. I actually know a lot of, I would say, random information, useful life information just from being in HPS. And this comes from a bunch of reasons. One of them being that HPS is such a really big event, and thinking that it's only involved in medicine is definitely an understatement. There's a lot more that HPS dabbles in, and just being part of such a committee, I've learned how financing works. I've learned how sponsorship and donation money works for events like this. I've learned how outreach for attendees differs from outreach for volunteers, and it's also different from reaching out to professional speakers and actually convincing them to come present at such a symposium. So there's a lot that I learned about just life from being part of this committee. Also, you're surrounded by a lot of knowledgeable peers, and just like you said, talking to one person sometimes can give you a load of information. Being in a committee such as that can give you probably a sea of information. I would say even on a personal level, I have matured by being in HPS. You've been a member for a few weeks now, and you probably have noticed how everything has to be upheld to a certain professional standard, and then having to do this year after year actually gets you thinking a little bit different about life. It matures us, it has us advance professionally, so we can be better prepared for the future careers that we're choosing for ourselves. Otherwise, being part of the HPS committee has been just, honestly, sometimes I take it as a mental break from everything else, even though what we do is a lot of work and it's tedious work. But it's a little bit different from just hardcore studying and just taking in a lot of information at once. So I find myself doing HPS, or at least when I was not a co-director, when I was not a co-director, I used to find myself doing my HPS tasks whenever I just wanted a break from schoolwork. But I wasn't like, okay, but I just want a total break. I know I need to still get something done. HPS was a great filler for that time, and it felt good because it felt like I was doing something, achieving something, like I already said, changing a person's life perhaps, and it's a little bit mindless at times. So I believe, being in HPS definitely changed my outlook on life. As a senior, my tip would be, number one, just like we already said, put yourself out there, and to do so you need to ask, and you need to go looking for organizations or advisors or professors that can advocate and help you out. Being in a pre-med community, and I will honestly extract that a little bit more and say being in a pre-health community, it's a little bit competitive. All of us are aiming for the same exact programs, but there's only so many seats at those programs. So what I would definitely recommend is make friends when you're in these communities and get close to people, but also be very aware of how you present yourself around your peers, because since it is a very competitive community, you need to be careful with what you say, you need to be careful with what you do, because sometimes people think that, you know, they can perhaps eliminate a little bit of competition if they know that someone has been, you know, doing something that perhaps goes against the UNM code of conduct, whether that be something just as simple as, I forgot my homework assignment and I'm just gonna copy it down really quick from a friend, for example, for a lab report, or it could be something even a little bit more involved. Be cautious of such things and of who you're doing it around. Be cautious of what you're saying around certain people, because being in this competitive community means that also people would like to always make sure they stand out the most, even if it meant making somebody else stand out a little bit less. So that's a piece of advice that we were not told when we were freshmen, and by we I'm thinking about a few peers that I have right now that are all seniors, and we all unfortunately had to learn it the hard way. Otherwise, I think just focus on your classes. You know, you're here to learn. Try to put your education first, and everything else should come right behind your education. But that does not mean lose yourself completely to your studies, because you also need to have a personality, you also need to have hobbies, interests, you need to have a life. In order to be able to give it your best every day, you need to take time off at the end of every day, and you need to take time off at the end of every week, and at the end of every month, and so on and so forth. So I think that's actually another misconception, because when I was a freshman, and a lot of the freshmen I knew, we would just, you know, run around from point to point, place to place, assignment to assignment all day long, and we would have absolutely no lives, and unfortunately it burns you out in the long run. So this is a very, very long race, and if you want to stay in it, you need to take as many breaks as you can, and you need to just do the things that you really enjoy in life.